Phoebe Bishop was the kind of girl everyone thought they knew, bright, dependable, and full of plans for the future. But when she vanished one ordinary evening, her name quickly turned from a familiar face in a quiet town to the center of a chilling mystery. Gregory Mallon was just a quiet stranger with a blue truck until evidence revealed he had been watching Phoebe for months. Now, with one girl missing, one man gone, and a cryptic video claiming she's safe, the question haunts everyone who followed the case: what really happened to Phoebe Bishop? Phoebe Bishop was 17 years old when she disappeared from the quiet town of Marlin's Edge, a place where nothing ever happened until it did. On June 3, a warm Friday evening, she left her job at Sweet Crumbs Bakery at exactly 6:13 p.m., captured on a security camera smiling as she waved goodbye to her manager. That would be the last time anyone would ever see her. She didn't text her mom to say she was on her way, and she didn't show up at the bus stop where her younger brother waited for her like he did every other day. At first, her mother assumed she had gone out with friends. But by 9 p.m., when calls went unanswered and Phoebe's phone went straight to voicemail, panic took over. Her family contacted the police and filed a missing persons report immediately. By Saturday morning, word had spread like wildfire. Phoebe was well liked in town, smart, kind, involved in school clubs and known for babysitting half the kids in the neighborhood. She wasn't the type to just vanish. Volunteers searched the nearby woods, combed the beach, and canvassed neighborhoods with flyers bearing her photo and the word missing in bold red letters. Detectives questioned family, friends, co-workers, anyone who had spoken to her. In the last few days, no one had noticed anything strange. She hadn't mentioned feeling scared. She hadn't argued with anyone. Her life, by all appearances, seemed perfectly normal. Then came the first and only clue. On Sunday afternoon, 3 miles from town, a jogger spotted a pair of muddy white sneakers near the cliffs overlooking Horseshoe Bay. Police confirmed they were Phoebe's. They were found facing the ocean, perfectly placed side by side, as if she had taken them off herself. Search and rescue teams began scouring the waters below, fearing the worst. But divers found no body, no clothing, no backpack, nothing. Just waves crashing against the rocks and the weight of unanswered questions. As news spread beyond Marlin's Edge, the media jumped on the story. A teenage girl with no history of trouble, vanishing without a trace, was every parent's nightmare. Speculation grew quickly. Some believed she had taken her own life. Others were certain she had been taken. Online forums lit up with theories, from abduction to secret double lives. But the investigation turned up nothing definitive. Her bank account had been untouched since the day she vanished. Her phone's last known location was near the bakery, and then it simply went dark. The town that once felt safe began locking its doors. Parents walked their kids to school. Strangers looked more suspicious. A community that once prided itself on being close-knit now found itself tangled in whispers and fear. Phoebe Bishop was gone, and no one knew why. The hardest part wasn't just the loss, it was the silence that followed. There was no goodbye note. No camera footage of her leaving with someone. No final message. Just a girl who walked out of work and never made it home. As the days turned into weeks, the search for Phoebe Bishop continued, but the energy began to shift. The community that once rallied with hope now simmered with unease. Behind closed doors, neighbors whispered about what might have really happened. While the public image of Phoebe painted her as a wholesome, grounded teenager, investigators began to uncover a more complicated side of her life, one that no one close to her seemed to fully understand. Her phone records revealed a pattern of late-night calls and messages to an untraceable prepaid number. These calls weren't brief, some lasted over an hour and occurred almost daily in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. Whoever she was talking to wasn't part of her known friend group. The number had no name, no address, and was purchased at a gas station 2 towns over. Her parents had no idea she even had contact with anyone outside her usual circle. That mystery caller became the first real lead, but it went nowhere. The phone was a burner used for a short period, then shut off completely the day she vanished. There were other subtle signs that Phoebe had been hiding something. Bank records showed she had withdrawn $100 3 separate times during the week before she disappeared, always in cash, always in person, and always from the same ATM just outside of town. That was unusual for her. Phoebe rarely carried cash and hardly spent money outside of small purchases. When detectives asked her family about it, they were at a loss. She hadn't mentioned needing money, and there were no large purchases or travel plans they knew of. On social media, nothing seemed off at first glance. But a deeper investigation revealed a locked Instagram account she had followed days before she vanished. The account had no posts, no bio, just a black profile picture and a single follower, Phoebe. What caught the investigators' attention was the account's name, @they no higher left. That cryptic phrase, along with the timing of the follow, was enough to spook even the most seasoned detectives. At school, her best friend Brianna admitted Phoebe had become distant in the last month. She started skipping their usual lunch meetups and avoided group outings. She was jumpy, checking over her shoulder often, and seemed anxious. Brianna had asked if something was wrong, but Phoebe always smiled and brushed it off. Now, those signs took on a much darker meaning. Her co-workers also recalled an unusual incident. A week before her disappearance, Phoebe had a heated conversation with a man in the parking lot behind the bakery. He was older, driving a faded blue pickup truck. No one knew who he was, and the security camera didn't capture a clear view of his face or license plate. The encounter lasted less than 3 minutes, but afterward, Phoebe seemed shaken. She went back inside without saying a word and left work early. Every new discovery added another layer to the puzzle. It became clear that Phoebe had been keeping secrets. Secrets that no one had seen coming. Secrets that now seemed to be the key to understanding why she disappeared, nearly a month after Phoebe Bishop's disappearance. Just as the investigation was beginning to stall, a mysterious phone call breathed new life into the case. It came in the middle of the night to the local police station. The voice on the line was low, gravelly, distorted as if run through a filter. The caller didn't identify themselves or offer any explanation. They simply said, "She's not dead. Look behind the farmhouse on Dalton Road," and then hung up. Dalton Road was a forgotten stretch of land on the outskirts of town, dotted with decaying buildings and overgrown fields. The farmhouse in question had been abandoned for over 2 decades. No one lived there. No one went there. It was the kind of place kids dared each other to visit on Halloween, but otherwise stayed far away from. By dawn, investigators were on the property with dogs, flashlights, and evidence kits. The house itself was crumbling, with broken windows, rotting floors, and graffiti covering the walls. But it was the shed behind the house that turned the search into something far more sinister. The lock had been recently broken. Inside, officers found several items that sent chills down their spines. First, there were fragments of clothing, pieces of a uniform from Sweet Crumb's bakery, the same style Phoebe had been wearing when she vanished. The fabric was torn and dirty, stuffed behind a pile of dusty crates. Worse was what they found next, a strand of long brown hair clinging to the splintered wood of a chair leg in the corner. Forensics would later confirm it was Phoebe's. That alone was disturbing, but what truly shocked investigators was the discovery of a Polaroid photograph taped to the wall just above the chair. In it, Phoebe was sitting upright, tied to the chair with rope, her hands behind her back. Her face was expressionless, her eyes blank. There was no blood, no visible injuries, but the photo radiated something deeply unsettling. She looked broken. There was no time stamp, no identifying background in the photo. Just an old wooden wall behind her. The camera used to take it was unknown, and there were no fingerprints on the image or the tape. Still, it confirmed two things: Phoebe had been alive after her disappearance, and she had likely been held against her will. This new evidence reignited the investigation. Now it wasn't just a missing person case, it was a possible abduction. Media attention surged. News vans returned to Marlin's Edge. The town that had begun to settle into quiet grief was once again rattled by fear and unanswered questions. Detectives began reanalyzing every clue, re-interviewing everyone, and expanding their search to old properties, rental cabins, and storage units across the county. But despite the intensity of the renewed efforts, nothing else was found. The anonymous caller never contacted police again. The farmhouse offered no further evidence. Phoebe Bishop was still gone, and though the photo proved she had been alive, it only deepened the mystery. Who was holding her? Why that shed? And where was she now? With the disturbing photo of Phoebe now in evidence, investigators focused their attention on the man in the blue pickup truck, the same man seen arguing with her in the bakery parking lot days before she vanished. A tip from a local mechanic finally gave the man a name: Gregory Mallon. He had brought in a rusted blue truck for repairs just a week before Phoebe disappeared. The mechanic remembered him clearly because of his unsettling demeanor and the fact that he paid in cash, asked no questions, and refused to leave a phone number. Mallon's background didn't help his suspicions. He was a former landscaper who had worked various temporary jobs in nearby towns. He had no family in Marlin's Edge, no friends that anyone knew of, and a criminal record that included trespassing and harassment charges, most involving young women. He had moved into a rental property on the edge of town 6 months earlier, but neighbors said he was rarely seen. His blinds were always drawn, and his mailbox often overflowed with unopened letters. When police tried to track him down, they found the house abandoned. It looked as if he had left in a hurry, food left out, drawers open, personal items gone. What they did find was far more disturbing. In a crawlspace beneath the house, they discovered a cardboard box containing several unsettling items: a small collection of women's jewelry, a spiral-bound notebook filled with incoherent writings and symbols, and a silver locket engraved with the initials PB Phoebe Bishop. It matched the description of a necklace her mother had said Phoebe never took off. The most chilling discovery came in the form of a USB drive tucked into the lining of the box. When examined, it revealed dozens of video clips, grainy, handheld recordings taken from a distance. Each showed Phoebe in her daily routines, walking home from school, working at the bakery, sitting alone at the park. Some were filmed at night, through the windows of her home. Mallon had been stalking her for months, studying her patterns, watching her without her knowledge. This evidence painted a terrifying picture. Phoebe hadn't been randomly taken, she had been targeted. Planned. Watched for weeks, maybe longer. Investigators theorized that Mallon had likely been the person in the Polaroid photo and that the shed behind the farmhouse had been his holding place. But the timeline didn't fit neatly. The surveillance videos stopped abruptly 2 days before Phoebe vanished. After that, there were no more files, no logs, no signs of where he had gone or where he might have taken her. Efforts to locate Mallon intensified. His name and face were shared nationwide. Surveillance cameras at gas stations and highways were scanned, but there were no hits. It was as though he had disappeared just as completely as Phoebe had. The only thing authorities knew for certain was that Phoebe had been alive after she vanished and that someone, most likely Mallon, had held her captive. But beyond that, the trail was cold. Every new lead seemed to unravel into more confusion, more fear, and fewer answers. Just when it seemed the case had reached its end, another shocking development thrust the mystery of Phoebe Bishop back into the spotlight. 7 weeks after her disappearance, the police department received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a flash drive containing a single video. It was short, only 24 seconds long, but it changed everything. The Footage showed Phoebe in what appeared to be a motel room. The lighting was dim and the camera was slightly shaky, as if it had been set down on a table and left recording. Phoebe sat at the edge of a bed, wearing a grey hoodie and staring blankly ahead. Her face was pale and her hair had been crudely cut. She didn't appear hurt, but something in her expression was hollow, numb. Just before the video ended, she looked directly into the camera and spoke quietly, "I'm safe, but I can't come back." Then the screen went black. Investigators scrambled to trace the video's origin. Metadata pointed to a rundown motel 3 hours away, near the state border. When they arrived, the room was empty. The clerk said a young woman had checked in, using a fake name, and paid in cash. She stayed for just one night. Inside the room, detectives found no luggage, no personal items, just a cracked mirror above the sink and a torn piece of paper under the bed. On it were the words, "He's gone. I'm free. Don't find me." It was the first undeniable proof that Phoebe was alive, and not just alive, but moving, hiding, staying out of reach. The note confirmed what many had suspected: Gregory Mallon had held her captive, and somehow she had escaped. But instead of returning home, she had chosen to disappear again. Theories exploded across the internet. Some believed Phoebe had developed a form of psychological trauma known as Stockholm Syndrome, causing her to fear returning to her old life. Others were convinced she had killed Mallon and was now on the run. A few even questioned whether the girl in the video was really Phoebe at all. Meanwhile, the search for Mallon intensified, but he was never found. No sightings. No purchases. No digital trace. It was as if he had simply ceased to exist. Whether he was dead, in hiding, or part of something larger, no one could say. Phoebe's family, devastated and confused, pleaded for her to come home. They released emotional statements and set up a hotline. But no further contact came. No letters. No calls, no sightings. She had vanished for a second time. This time, seemingly by choice. The case was eventually closed due to lack of new evidence, reclassified not as a missing person but as a voluntary disappearance. Yet nothing about it felt resolved. The truth about what Phoebe endured, how she escaped, and why she chose not to return remained buried. To this day, Phoebe Bishop's name lingers like a shadow. Her story became more than just a mystery. It became a haunting reminder that sometimes, even when someone is found, the answers are never truly recovered.